The airlock alarm was screaming before I even opened my eyes. I was still strapped into the cargo net when the ship lurched sideways, and somewhere above me, Mira Halden was shouting orders in a voice that cracked halfway through. 3 days. That is how long I had worked for her. 3 days, and already something was trying to break into her ship. I dropped out of the net, hit the deck on my feet, and moved. The corridor lights had shifted to red, emergency red, the kind that means a hull breach is close or a boarding party is closer. I could hear the clank of a magnetic clamp locking onto the outer plating, somewhere near the cargo bay, and I knew exactly what that sound meant. Someone wanted in, and they did not plan on asking nicely. Mira met me at the junction, her curled antennae flat against her skull, which on a Velk like her meant pure fear. She was young for a trade captain, barely past her 20th cycle, running her father's route because there was nobody else left to run it. She looked at me like I was supposed to have an answer. "Pirates," she said. "Scanner picked up a ship 3 minutes ago. I didn't even see them coming." "I did," I said. She blinked at me. "What?" There was no time to explain that I had felt the change in the ship's engine hum before the sensors even registered another vessel nearby, that my body had been trained for years to notice things before instruments could. There was no time to explain any of it. So I just said, "Get to the cockpit. Lock the door. Whatever happens, do not open it until I say your name." She hesitated for half a second, which told me she still wasn't sure the cheap human guard she had hired for almost nothing was worth trusting with her life. Then the ship shuddered again, and she ran. I turned toward the cargo bay. 3 days earlier, on a station called Varen's Rest, I had been sitting on an upturned crate with a sign that said, "Guard for hire, reasonable rates," when Mira Halden walked past me for the second time. The first time, she had looked and kept walking. The second time, she stopped. "You're human," she said, the way most people said it. Not an insult exactly. More like she was stating a fact about a piece of old equipment she wasn't sure still worked. "Last time I checked," I said. "You're cheap. I'm efficient." She almost smiled at that. Almost. Then she told me about her route, about the debts she had inherited along with her father's ship, about how none of the licensed security companies would take a contract from someone who could only pay in produce futures and half a season's fuel credits. I told her I would take it. She asked why. I told her the truth, or most of it. I told her I needed the work. What I did not tell her was that I used to be paid in numbers with more zeros than her entire trade route would earn in 10 years. I did not tell her that the reason no security company would touch her contract was the same reason nobody would touch mine, if they knew who I really was. On paper, I was Callum Reeve, 34 years old, former transport escort, no notable record. That was the story. That was the only story anyone needed. The truth was quieter and heavier than that, and I had spent 2 years trying to forget it. Now, standing in the corridor outside the cargo bay with the boarding clamp grinding through the outer hull, the quiet part of me woke up again, whether I wanted it to or not. The door buckled inward with a shriek of metal, and 4 figures dropped through the gap, wearing patchwork armor that told me everything about who they were. Independent raiders. Not organized, not disciplined, but armed and desperate, which made them dangerous in their own clumsy way. They saw me, and one of them actually laughed. "It's a human," he said to the others, in trade common, thick with an accent I recognized from the outer belt systems. Captain's ship only had a human guard. I did not answer him. I had learned a long time ago that talking during a fight wastes air you might need later. The first one came at me fast, testing, probably expecting me to flinch or freeze the way most solo human guards did against 4 armed raiders. I did not flinch. I stepped inside his reach before he finished his swing, redirected his arm past me, and used his own momentum to put him into the crate wall behind him. He slid down it, dazed, not moving. The other 3 stopped laughing. "He's fast," one of them said, and there was something in her voice that had shifted from confidence to caution. Fast was not the right word, but I did not correct her. What I had was not speed exactly, it was economy. Every movement I made was the smallest one required to end the threat in front of me and move to the next. No wasted motion, no wasted breath, no hesitation. It was a way of moving that had been drilled into me over years I did not like to think about, back when I wore a different uniform and answered to a different name in official records that no longer technically existed. 2 more came at once, which was smarter, and for a moment I had to actually work. I caught a strike on my forearm, felt the impact all the way to my shoulder, and used the half-second that cost my opponent to put him down hard enough that he would not be getting back up for a while. The 4th raider, the one who had laughed first, backed toward the breach in the hull, weapon raised, hand shaking. "Stay back," he said. "Stay back, or I'll—" I was already moving before he finished the sentence. I closed the distance, took the weapon out of his hand, before his finger fully closed on the trigger, and put him on the ground next to his friends. The whole thing, from the first raider through the door to the last one disarmed, took under a minute. I stood in the wreckage of the cargo bay, breathing steady, and realized the ship had gone completely quiet. Then I heard the cockpit door hiss open, which it was not supposed to do until I said her name, and Mira stood there staring at the 4 raiders on the floor, and then at me. "You said not to open the door," she said, voice shaking slightly. "I did say that. You didn't say your name." "No," I agreed. "I didn't." She looked at the raiders again, then at the doorframe I had bent slightly out of shape without noticing, then back at me. Something in her expression had changed, and it was not the look of someone who had just watched their bargain security guard earn his pay. It was the look of someone realizing they had bought something they did not fully understand. "Who are you?" she said slowly. "Actually." I could have lied again. I had gotten good at lying, or at least good at not telling the whole truth, over the past 2 years. But something about the way she asked it, not with fear exactly, more with the careful curiosity of someone piecing together a puzzle, made me decide the lie had run its course. "My name really is Callum," I said. That part was true. "And the rest?" I looked at the 4 unconscious raiders, at the twisted metal where the hull had been breached, at the ship that Mira Halden had poured everything she owned into keeping running. I thought about how easy this had been for me, how it had barely registered as effort, and how that fact alone would terrify most people, if they understood what it meant. "I used to do work like this for a living," I said. "Not exactly like this. Bigger, worse. There was a unit, a long time ago, that handled situations the rest of the galaxy pretended did not exist. Conflicts between systems that never made it into any news report. I was part of that unit for 11 years. Mira's antennae, which had been flat with fear a few minutes earlier, were now standing straight up, which on a Velk meant sharp attention. "What unit?" "It doesn't have a name anymore. It doesn't exist anymore, officially. I made sure of that myself, 2 years ago, when I walked away." "Why did you walk away?" That question landed harder than I expected. I had been asked it before, by people who thought they deserved an answer, because of rank or money or curiosity, and I had never actually told anyone the truth. Standing in that cargo bay, with the adrenaline still leaving my system and 4 strangers unconscious at my feet, I found myself wanting to tell her. "Because I got tired of being useful only when something needed breaking," I said. "I wanted to be something else. Someone who fixes things instead, someone ordinary." Mira was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped over one of the raiders, careful not to touch him, and looked up at me with an expression I could not quite read. "You are the least ordinary person I have ever met," she said. "But you fixed my cargo bay door before you fixed anything else on this ship, 3 days ago, without me asking, and you just saved my entire crew without hesitating. I don't think ordinary is the right word for what you actually are. I think the word you're looking for is careful." I did not have a response to that. Nobody had ever put it quite that way before. We secured the raiders, called it in to the nearest patrol relay, and by the time the sun of the nearest system rose over the horizon of the small moon we were orbiting for repairs, word had already started to travel. Not fast, not loud, but the kind of quiet ripple that moves through certain circles when something unusual happens. A trade ship with a single human guard had fought off 4 armed raiders without a scratch on the crew. People who paid attention to that sort of thing started paying attention. 3 days after the attack, while Mira and I were reinforcing the hull plating together, a message came through the ship's comm system, addressed specifically to me, using a name I had not heard spoken aloud in 2 years. Ashbourne. That was the name they used to know me by, back when I was still part of the unit that did not officially exist. Whoever sent the message knew that name, which meant whoever sent it knew far more about me than any random trade route bandit should. Mira read the message over my shoulder before I could stop her, because she had a habit of doing that, and her antennae went stiff again. Ashbourne, she read aloud. That's not exactly a subtle name. It wasn't meant to be subtle, I said. It was meant to be a warning. The message was short. It came from a man named Doran Vec, someone I recognized instantly, not from friendship, but from the opposite of it. Vec had run supply lines for exactly the kind of operations my old unit used to shut down. We had crossed paths twice before, both times ending badly for his side. The message simply said that he had heard Ashbourne was guarding a small trade ship near the outer relay systems, and that he wanted to know if the rumors were true, because if they were, he had a proposal worth more credits than Mira's entire trade route would earn in a lifetime. He wants to hire you away from me, Mira said, reading my face rather than the message. He wants to buy me back into a life I already walked away from, I said. There's a difference. Will you go? I looked at her, standing there with grease on her hands from 3 days of ship repairs, having just faced down an armed boarding party without running, having asked me more honest questions in 3 days than anyone had asked me in 2 years. I thought about the offer, about the money, about how easy it would be to slide back into the version of myself that people paid fortunes to either hire or avoid. No, I said. I'm not going anywhere. Mira did not smile right away. Instead, she studied me carefully, the way she had studied the hull damage earlier that morning, looking for weak points, looking for the catch. Why not? She said. You could have anything you wanted with that offer. Instead, you're patching a cargo door on a ship that barely runs, for someone who paid you almost nothing. You didn't pay me almost nothing, I said. You paid me the only thing I actually wanted. Which is? A reason to be something other than a weapon. She went quiet after that, and we finished the repair without talking, but something had shifted between us, something neither of us said out loud yet. Doran Vec did not take my silence as an answer. 2 days later, his ship intercepted us at the edge of the relay system, not with an offer this time, but with a demonstration of exactly how much he wanted me back on his side, or failing that, how much he wanted to make sure I would never work against him again. His crew was larger than the raiders, better armed, better trained, and this time, they came for the ship itself, not just a boarding attempt. Mira's small trade vessel had no weapons to speak of, only patched armor plating, and a stubborn engine that had kept it running for longer than it should have. You should hide, I told her, as Vec's ship locked its docking clamp onto our hull. I already tried hiding once, she said. You told me not to open the door. I opened it anyway. I think we both know I'm not very good at following that instruction. There was no time to argue. The clamp released a boarding team of 6, and this time, they were not raiders looking for easy cargo. They were trained soldiers looking for me specifically. I met them in the same corridor as before, but this time, I did not hold anything back. There was no version of this situation where careful restraint would be enough. Vec's people had trained against opponents like me before, or at least they thought they had, and that confidence made them dangerous in a different way than the raiders had been. The fight was fast and precise, each movement calculated to end a threat with the least amount of damage possible, both to myself and to the people attacking me. I did not enjoy it. That was the part most people never understood about someone like me. It was not enjoyment. It was simply a skill, honed over years, that I used only when there was no other option left. When it was over, 5 of the 6 boarders were disarmed and unable to continue, and the 6th, a woman with sharp eyes, who I recognized as Vec's second-in-command, stood at the edge of the corridor watching me, with something between fear and grim respect. He said the rumors were exaggerated, she said quietly. He said Ashbourne retired soft. Tell him I retired, I said. Not soft, retired. She left without another word, and the docking clamp released moments later, Vec's ship pulling away rather than risk losing anyone else. I stood in the corridor, breathing steady despite everything, and turned to find Mira standing at the far end, having watched the entire thing from a position she was absolutely not supposed to be in. "You were supposed to hide," I said. "I told you I'm not good at that." She walked toward me slowly, stepping around the disarmed borders without fear this time, and stopped close enough that I could see her antennae had gone soft, no longer flat with terror or stiff with alertness, but relaxed in a way I had not seen from her before. "I keep trying to understand something," she said. "You could have taken that offer. You could have gone back to being whoever Ashbourne was, with all the money and power that apparently comes with it. Instead you stayed here, fixing a cargo door, guarding a trade route that barely pays for fuel. I don't understand why. I told you why. You said I paid you the only thing you wanted. I still don't fully understand what that means." I thought about how to explain 2 years of quiet exhaustion, of walking away from a life that had taken everything from me, except the ability to end a fight quickly, of arriving at a station with nothing but a sign offering guard work for reasonable rates, and hoping someone, anyone, would hire me for something small and ordinary. I thought about how she had stopped walking that first day, how she had looked at me like I was a person worth talking to, rather than a tool worth renting. "You looked at me before you knew what I was," I said. "You looked at me and saw someone who needed work, and you gave it to me, even though you could barely afford it yourself. Nobody had done that in a long time. Everyone else either wanted Ashbourne or wanted nothing to do with him. You wanted Callum, just Callum. That's worth more to me than anything Vec could offer." Mira was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had lost the sharp edge of fear it carried during the fight and settled into something softer. "I think I wanted more than just a guard," she said. "I think I've wanted more than that since the second day, when you fixed the door before I even asked, and didn't mention it, and I found out only because I tripped over the tools you left behind. You noticed that. I notice a lot of things about you. I just didn't know what to call it until now." We stood there in the corridor, surrounded by the aftermath of a fight that most people would never have survived, and for the first time since I had walked away from my old life, I did not feel like a weapon waiting to be used. I felt like a person standing in front of someone who saw him clearly and had not looked away. "I should renegotiate my contract," I said finally. Mira raised an eyebrow, the fear completely gone from her expression now, replaced by something warmer. "Renegotiate how?" "Less pay," I said. "More time." She laughed, a real laugh, the first one I had heard from her since we met. "You're terrible at negotiating." "I've been told that before." "By who?" "Nobody who mattered as much as you do." The trade route continued after that, quieter than before, because word had spread through the outer systems that Mira Halden's small trade ship carried a guard nobody in their right mind wanted to test twice. Vec never sent another message. The raiders who survived our first encounter told their story to anyone who would listen, and the story grew with each retelling, until people who had never met me spoke about Ashbourne the way people speak about weather systems, something to be respected and avoided rather than challenged. None of that mattered as much to me as the quiet mornings that followed, repairing a ship that was slowly, steadily becoming something worth more than the sum of its patched parts, standing beside someone who had bought the cheapest guard on the station and ended up with something neither of us had expected to find. She still called me cheap sometimes, mostly to make me smile, and I still let her, because the truth was simple enough that I had stopped hiding from it. She had gotten the better end of that bargain, whether she knew it at the time or not, and I had gotten something I did not know I was still capable of wanting. A reason to stay,